What's going on, fish nerds? It's been a couple weeks since we've looked at the 30-gallon tall after all the changes I made in that tank. So I want to give you guys an update today because there are a bunch of babies in this tank. Alright, so this is how she looks right now, and I do apologize. I've got the parents pretty spooked because I was actually in the tank moving a few things around. First I was cleaning off the glass, and the rag I was using to clean off the glass just totally spooked them and the fry, and they were all hiding. And then I got in there to replant this Anubias and the petite as well, and because they were just floating around up at the top, so I wanted to get those replanted. So I was in there bumping around a little bit, and that got them all freaked out. But look at all these babies. And I know they look completely tiny to you guys, but they are way, way bigger than they were a week or so ago whenever they first hatched. And I came home to a cloud of these guys swimming around. And they still mostly stick with their parents, or at least with one parent. If the parents separate, they tend to stick with one or the other, but some of them have got to where they're starting to venture off a little bit, but they have just grown so much. And what's really cool about this is when I came home to all these fry, I didn't have any live foods. I didn't have any brine shrimp, I didn't have any micro worms, I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. So I just fed these guys what I had, which was Hikari First Bites, and apparently that was good enough. I fed them the First Bites, and I also fed them some spirulina powder, and they kept growing, and now they're actually eating just crushed flake food. Just take some flake food and crush it up in my fingers, and they're eating that, even as small as they were, and they're growing really, really well. So clearly something's working. One thing I am concerned about though, I am getting nervous that they're about to breed again. So I don't know if they will cannibalize this batch of fry or not whenever they lay their next batch of eggs. So I'm trying to figure out what I can do to get these fry out of here. If any of you guys have experience with Jewel Cichlids, any type of Hemichromis, and you have any advice on that, on whether they tend to leave their own fry alone even after they move on to the next batch or not, I would greatly appreciate any advice you guys have on that subject. But I am going to try to get a tank freed up so that I can get these guys moved into another tank and grow them out. But it's just been really cool just watching this tank and watching these fish. I just love watching this cloud of fry following their parents around. It's just so cool. Now the last batch of fry that you saw in the aquascaping video, those did get eaten by the guppies that had been in this tank. So what happened after that was when they laid the next batch of eggs, they actually went after the guppies. So they did not just leave them alone the way they did with the first batch. So these guys actually did take out a few guppies, but then I did remove the survivors and put them in another tank. And so now it's just these guys, and I've got 3 bristlenose plecos in here, and the bristlenose plecos leave them entirely alone. And they generally leave the bristlenose alone simply because they will tend to stay in these caves. Here's one of the males. But if the bristlenose venture too far out of the caves, the Hemichromis will chase them back into the caves because of the fry that are out. Now if they're all hanging out back here in this corner and this guy were to come out, they wouldn't be too worried about it. But if everybody's up here in the front and one of the bristlenose venture out of the cave, they will chase them back into the cave. But the bristlenose are sturdy enough and big enough that it's no harm to anybody. So everybody's getting along pretty well in here. So as far as escape goes, you'll notice here that the valve is gone. It did not make it. It wasn't actually in the best of shape when I brought it home anyway, but I was thinking it might pull through, and I don't know if it was just because it was too weak already from being in not good shape, or I don't know if these guys messed with it and dug it up some. I suspect it just wasn't the healthiest valve that I brought home. So it did not pull through and make it. Most of the sag is still doing pretty good. It's not really taken off yet, just still kind of getting rooted in. But it's all still hanging out down there. Like I said, I did have to replant some of the Anubias that came loose from between the rocks just because I didn't use super glue whenever I first planted it. And in case you're wondering what that big black box is back here in this corner, that is actually an algae scrubber. I want to give special thanks to Santa Montica Filtration, not a sponsor of this video, but they did send me this algae scrubber to try out to see if it would work for me. So they sent that to me free of charge, and I greatly appreciate that. Thank you very much, Santa Montica Filtration. So this is the HOG 1 HOG, which stands for Hang On Glass, because this just uses magnets to mount onto the glass. So it just mounts on the side of the tank. You got half of it with all the electronics on the outside of the glass, and the half that doesn't have any electronics is actually inside the tank. And so the way this works, there is an air line running into the part on the inside, and that's getting water to flow through the algae scrubber, and there is a light on the inside of the box. It's on the outside of the tank, but shining into the tank, and the black box is holding all that light with the exception of where those little holes are. And the concept is that the algae will grow on the inside of this box because of the light that's shining in there rather than in the rest of your tank. So if the nutrients that would support algae growth are being used inside the box, they can't be used outside the box. And I did have a little bit of green spot algae growing in this tank before I redid the aquascape. So in order to prevent that again, I did decide to put this algae scrubber in this tank. Algae scrubbers are used a whole lot in saltwater systems. They're not as common in freshwater systems, but I was curious to see if this would work for me to help prevent any of that green spot algae from coming back in this tank now that I've done the aquascape. And so on the inside panel, there's this white, gritty, it almost looks like big pieces of salt that are all glued in there, but clearly it's not salt, that would dissolve, but it's just this fine, gravelly, crystalline substance in there, and that's a rough surface for the algae to grow on. And so you've got the light shining on that surface with the water flowing through the algae scrubber, so that way you get the algae growing in there. Now when I first hooked this up to the air line running from my central air pump, the air pressure was just way too strong and it was just bubbling like crazy. So I did take the air line and I pinched it off, not all the way, and I just used a piece of this lead for holding plants to hold it in place there. Alright guys, so that's the 30-gallon tall. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And if you're new here and you like this kind of video, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, because I'm putting out new videos like this every single week. Alright guys, I do want to say thank you very much for watching. You guys are awesome. God bless you, fish nerds. I'll see you next time.